Hey leaders, in this episode of Leading Collaborative Response, Lorna and I have the opportunity to sit down and dive deeper into a school's continuum of supports. We are going to discuss why taking another school's continuum and just transporting it into your location is ill-advised. You want to be able to ensure that the continuum in its basic design is capturing the expertise that exists within your building. Essentially, we are trying to say we have good things happening in our building. What are they? Because we're going to name them, articulate them, and then tier them into our continuum. Lots of great ideas and strategies to be able to bring back to your school to really ensure that continuum is capturing the exceptional expertise that exists within your organization. So let's get started.
Are you a leader who is navigating the nuances of leading collaborative response in your school or district? Are you unsure of what collaborative response is? Are you looking to understand the critical role leadership plays when establishing and refining a collaborative response approach?
Collaborative response began as a grassroots approach to focus on the needs of students through a framework of collaboration. That approach has grown to a movement that is training leadership and education.
Through the Leading Collaborative Response podcast, Kurtis and I share our own experiences of leading collaborative response and lessons learned as we continue to learn and gain insight through the experiences of working alongside others. We also have the opportunity to engage in conversations with school and divisional leaders implementing the framework in their own organizations.
We know great leaders build great teams because that is what every child deserves. Subscribe to the Leading Collaborative Response podcast and join the thousands of schools seeing success for students through intentional and focused collaborative efforts.
And welcome once again. We hope that you are doing well, and we're excited to be able to connect with you once again. Today, we are going to focus in on the continuum of supports and why it's so critically important that we see it as a mechanism to examine and in some cases capture expertise of the team. We know that we have a large number of different samples from schools and great work that schools have done, and thank you for willingness to share, but just taking a continuum that's well developed, well designed, and saying, oh great, we'll use this for our staff team and save the work. We're kind of missing the point. The co-creation is the most critical part of that continuum, and then over time continuing to build it. But again, so that your teachers see themselves and their teaching practice reflected in that continuum.
Yeah, absolutely. And, huge caution in grabbing somebody else's continuum and making it your own, because what is going to happen is that it becomes just a document that no one really understands and that there won't be a consistent use for it either. And so you want your teachers to be able to, as you mentioned, co-create so that they can see the practices that they are using in their own classrooms reflected within that continuum.
So we know, and we'll include in the links with the video, a document that we have around refining and utilizing. You're always going to be updating your different continuums that you have in place. But when I, as a teacher, can reflect upon what should we do to support the student, I go to the continuum and I see some of my expertise found right there. Not only is that helps to reinforce my teaching practice, but it also can be a mechanism where we can say, I've designed a really good way to do this particular strategy within the classroom. And it's that idea of everyone is an expert in that case, but we're all learners because I could learn from somebody else within it. And we often talk, especially in the collaborative team meeting, we're creating mechanisms for distributed coaching where it's not solely relegated to a particular formalized role, but we're all helping and supporting and coaching within the formal structures, but then informally that bleeds over into hallway conversations, after school conversations for us.
When we co-create those continuum, I always get super excited about being involved in those, because there are such incredibly powerful conversations that happen about instructional practice that teachers have when they're developing that continuum, and the debate that they have about, whether it's a tier 1 practice or tier 2, or even the intention of what that instructional strategy does for students. So those conversations are so beneficial for your school, and creating that common understanding of, we are all doing similar pieces. Plus, we have, like I said, we've got experts and we've got learners in the building as well. And so we're going to learn from each other through that co-creation, but we also are identified as having some skill and expertise. And frankly, teachers don't take enough time to reflect on the fact that they're doing really great things for kids.
Well, and what you're sharing there is really one of the purposes of the development and ongoing refinement of a continuum, is you're normalizing the talk of practice within the building. And we know that that's not always the case. I've led schools where that was not the case for us. And again, that was not a knock on any individual. It's just that wasn't common practice to be able to share, well, in my classroom I do this, and in your classroom, and that's just natural. That's just what we do.
Well, and the other thing beyond that is that we sometimes do things in our own classrooms that we think everybody does them, so they're not anything to be talked about, or we just do them and it's just the way that I do things. So it's not anything great to be able to be shared. But yet, we really encourage, when you're developing your continuum supports, or even when you're working through key issues, that brainstorming those ideas, bring forward anything and everything, because any little thing can make a difference to the life
and
of
it
a
might
child.
Prompt an idea for me. Like, we're trying to get to that innovative thinking. So let's think a little bit and share some different things that we've seen schools do on how they continue to capture expertise. And of course, the initial development is all about exposing your toolboxes, articulating it, sharing it out, and we'll make sure in the notes that are shared out with this that we have a set of slides that schools can utilize or adapt when they're creating that continuum to start with. But how do we keep adding expertise? We'll be right back to continue this episode.
When we establish continuums of support for our school focused on established priorities, we are answering the question of what will we do when faced with questions of how to support the needs of our students. But the creation of these continuums are only the first step. Join us for the online workshop, 10 Considerations When Utilizing and Refining Your Continuums of Support, part of our Supporting Collaborative Response series. In this on-demand workshop, I will share 5 ways to effectively utilize your continuum of supports within your school, and 5 ways to further refine your continuums to ensure maximum impact. I'll also be sharing numerous resources, templates, and samples. Access this on-demand workshop and you'll have the ability to view and replay all or any portion of the workshop when it best fits your time. Register today to learn more about refining and utilizing your continuum of supports, an integral part of a school's collaborative response.
And now back to our conversation. To that, I think of one school, and this was years ago, where right in the collaborative team meeting, they had Post-it notes around the table. And they would say, if anyone brings up a suggestion or a strategy that we think is valuable that's not on our continuum, write it on the Post-it, because we're going to add those afterwards. We'll collect all those Post-its and somebody will go and update our continuum. I even think of another school where in their process they would identify a key issue, identify students that were having that key issue, but then the facilitator said, now everyone take just a couple minutes and on the Post-its, write down what are some ideas or strategies, and I'd like the person who is our continuum curator to be looking through the continuum at the same time and writing down ideas. And they took a kind of a silent pause to brainstorm, and then they started sharing out. They actually put all the Post-it notes on a shared space in the center. They wrote the key issue on the top of a page and then started putting Post-it notes on, and then afterward collected that back to go and update their continuum.
Yeah, I was in a school a while back where they had actually created a great big poster, like a giant poster of their continuum, laminated it, and then had it in their meeting room. And then as they were going through their team meetings, any of the team meetings, not just collaborative team meetings, they would look to their continuum, and if there was something missing, they would take a whiteboard marker and write it on there.
Oh, that's fantastic.
Or if they had something on that they thought, you know what, we actually don't use that strategy very often, they would cross it off. When the poster got too messy, they would take it down, update the poster itself, laminate it again, and then replace it so that they could keep going. So just in the moment, being able to think about what are the strategies that we're finding are incredibly effective, and to be sure to include those on our continuum.
Well, I was working with members of a student services team. It would have been last week within a school division, and they had talked about, so how can we help support the development of the continuum? And I had suggested you're maybe not there to support the initial development, but whenever you now come in to work with a teacher or to work with a student or to meet with a family, I would be asking for the continuum to be brought out and for you to be able to add suggestions or ideas that you're putting. So when some of your specialists are coming in, and I think of, an SLP coming in to work with a student, they should be taking a look at that continuum and saying, oh, here's a couple of other resources, ideas that you could be including. And that, again, is continuing to build up the expertise. So we often talk about those layers of team. When we're in the case consult conversations with one student, again, let's have our continuum out, because there might be ideas being surfaced, especially when we have those with specialization or really specialized expertise at the table.
So our specialists, like speech language pathologists, occupational therapists, physiotherapists, our psychologists, behavioralists, all those people who come in and help us in those more intensive situations are actually a good part of what they do with us is sharing strategies.
Yeah, absolutely.
So for us to be able to capture some of those ideas that we know are really effective with multiple students, then that becomes a great thing to add in onto our continuum.
Well, and you mentioned psychologists, and this was something that we did even way back when in our own school, is we had access to numerous psychological assessments for students. We took the front matter off,
the
so
personal
that
information.
the personal information, the diagnosis, anything like that. But we took that. It was often 2
Strategy
or 3
bank.
pages of strategies, and said, from this, is there anything that we should be putting on our continuum? Because it shouldn't just be things that we try because a student has received a diagnosis or whatnot. These are good things that could work for any student, potentially. And how do we continue to update that continuum?
Yeah, absolutely. And incredible ideas that could help us to expand our continuum depending on what area of development you've focused on.
I also had seen one school where they had taken specifically their tier 2 strategies, interventions and accommodations, and they were starting to list staff members next to them, where if you need help with this strategy, you should go see Lorna, because she has some resources. She understands it really well.
So a lot of our schools now, too, who are engaging in collaborative team meetings.
Excuse me.
You.
Thank you.
Those schools who are engaging in collaborative team meetings, of course, part of that process is being able to do that brainstorm around a key issue. And there are a number of schools who take those key issue brainstorms and the list of strategies there, and also review all of those brainstorms that have come from their own team, and look at what are things that we could capture from those conversations and add them into our
I'm thinking
continuum.
of a very specific example of what you're talking about. We'll include that as well in the notes if you want to be able to see. We also have a couple of podcasts that we've recorded in the past around. So we've established our continuum of supports, and now what? And the idea of continually refining your continuum so that we continue to use it as a mechanism to not only examine and discuss, share practice, but capture the expertise, the exceptional expertise that is available in each and every school.
Remembering that our continuum of supports is articulating what we do to support our students. And it's not about that, a student belongs on a tier or that it is that form of labeling, but it is about what our response is to the needs of students.
All right. So as always, we would love if you have any comments or reflections to share with us for what we've chatted about. We would love to continue to see examples of your continuums. We love being able to have those to then share out with other schools as well. So please let us know if you have a continuum that you'd like to be able to share. So with that, we wish you all the best, and we'll talk again soon.
See you soon.